On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk Jimmy Paschke is moving to Apex, 32K is coming, and ResiMercial. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 334, Influx of Ignorance.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Vadio, a leading manufacturer of professional PTZ cameras, Pro AV solutions, and UCC integration systems.
Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matty Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week we are pleased to be joined by two of my longest-standing friends. First, we have Mr. Joseph Whitaker. He's the Vice President of Business Development for Origin Acoustics. How you doing, Joseph?
Doing great. Glad, we're going to have some cool stories to talk about today.
We are. Then we have arguably my longest-standing friend in the business, Mr. Stephen Bronner. He is the owner of Pro Audio Georgia. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing great, man. Just fighting the network today. If it was easy, there wouldn't be no money in it, right?
Fighting the network or fighting the internet?
Fighting the network this time.
All right, let's kick this off with a story that comes to us from Residential Systems. A good friend of mine, a good friend of the show, a good friend of Joseph's, Mr. Jimmy Paschke, who previously was with Surgex. He is now the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Apex Technologies. As I said, coming from Surgex, where he was the Director of Sales, where we know him really well. So congratulations to Jimmy. This is a huge move for him. If you don't know Apex, they have a pretty large portfolio of brands, Display Technologies, Meridian Audio, TPI Cinema, Light Walls, Next Gen Tech, All In Sports, and Complete Acoustic Treatment Systems, CATS, and most recently HD Anywhere. Joe, this is arguably a huge move for Jimmy, and also a great move for Apex, bringing on really just a super quality guy. Like Jimmy is awesome. We're big fans of Jimmy over here. I know you are. What does this mean for Apex and for Jimmy?
Well, Jimmy, first off, congratulations, and make sure you're watching your mailbox in the next week or so, because I'm going to send you a congratulatory little drink for Jimmy there. But for Apex, it's huge because a lot of people know Jimmy from Surgex, but Jimmy's skill set and technology goes way beyond just UPSs and everything. This guy has his head wrapped around just about everything Apex offers. And the other thing is, he's a long-standing, loved veteran, right? When you bring somebody like that onto any team, it's an automatic win. Jimmy's a guy you can stick in front of just about anybody. I mean, you should have seen him at ProSource Vegas. I mean, the guy is just a workhorse. So congrats, Jimmy. Congrats, Apex. And I expect some pretty big things out of this, not only because of his job, but Jimmy has a lot of really good, strong relationships that he's going to be able to bring to the table over there, like huge ones.
Yeah, it's fantastic. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to our first main story of the day. This comes to us from CE Pro. 32K is coming, or at least a lesson in the importance of data rates. No one's manufacturing 32K at the moment. No. 16K, I've seen some people trying to do some image recording. Calm down, Steven. Red has got a camera that technically does 16K, but nobody can process it yet. So it's Red being Red and flexing. Not the Red we were talking about previously, which no one but Steven will get. So that's a good joke there for the podcast. What they're talking about here is essentially digging down into the frame rates and the data throughput of your HDMI cables and what is coming with Rev 2.1a. That's going to bring 8K, etc. But as the article talks about they still haven't certified any 8K cables. So yes, you can buy a display that technically does 8K. You can't really get a source that'll give you 8K, and you can't plug in a cable to give you 8K. Stephen?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can do a fiber connection
They just said
through a video card.
They just said they haven't certified any cables for 8K.
Okay, they haven't certified it, but a fiber optic cable linked through a video card will do it.
Okay. All right. Which I'm so glad you actually did that, because it brings up my question perfectly. I've got some cables that tell me they're rated for 40 gigabits a second. Do most integrators, like, does your everyday integrator who's got a couple of people and they're hanging TVs, they might do some surround sound, they might do, as we talked about on a show ago, they're selling some home theater, quote unquote, using the definition of a screen bigger than 42 inches and surround sound. Do they have any idea about this beyond just some basic, hey, I read it and my cable says it gives me, 4K and it's a 40 gig cable? Do we understand as an industry, do we understand the science behind this? Does it matter if we do or don't?
Man, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's go through it real quick. Number one, the average installer integrator in our industry has no clue. I get on the phone with guys all the time, all over the country, and the first thing I ask them is, do you have an HDMI test kit? Almost every integrator I know has a multimeter in their bag, and they do electrical on 1 out of 5 jobs. They touch HDMI on every job. Usually. Yeah, and they do HDMI on every job, and they don't have an HDMI tester. They don't think it's important. They just want to be able to plug it in and it work. So the answer to your question is no. Most of them have no clue. I make it a point every year to sit through at least one of Jeff Boccacio's talks. I keep Brent McCall at Metro on speed dial. And if anybody's listening to this and you ever have an HDMI problem between those two gentlemen, you will get it fixed. But as far as, do they need to know it? Yes, they need to know it. We need to be certified. We need to be educated. Our industry is struggling right now because of all the money that came in. We had an influx of, lack of a better way to put it, an influx of ignorance. Everybody flooded into our industry because everybody that could hang a TV was all of a sudden a professional AV guy. And now what's happening is business is slowing down, and these guys are going bankrupt because they're having to go back to these jobs over and over and over again just to keep them running, because they weren't designed properly to begin with, because they didn't use the right equipment. Last year as a company, we averaged 1.6 truck rolls a week for maintenance. I'll put that up against any of the big guys. And the reason why is when we design, we know what the cables do exactly. I've seen the eye test pattern on every cable that we put in for HDMI. I know what's going on with the equipment, and if something goes wrong, I don't have to plug and unplug until I figure it out or it fixes itself. I put a meter on it, and I know what the problem is. So the education side of our industry is something I really push, education, certification, things like that. These guys that came in, and not that they're bad people, I didn't say they were stupid. I said we had an influx of ignorance. And because of that, the end consumer is suffering. And until we get that fixed, which we may not, a lot of these guys they're going to go out of business, just like we saw in 2009, 2010. They're going to go out of business, and it sucks because they're good people. They're not bad techs. They just don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm. Just before we move on to Joe, for people who haven't looked, because you can go into Home Depot and buy a multimeter, and you can buy a variety of price points. What's a multimeter what is a HDMI test kit? And I think I know the answer, but what is a test kit that you use or you'd recommend? Because there's not that many on the market that are real. So let's be fair.
The test kit that I use is by Meridio, which is partnered up with AV Pro. They're basically the only ones that I recommend. Those guys really know, and if you have a problem, you can call Dustin. And honestly, I would put Dustin, actually, I'd put him up next to Brent McCall as far as knowledge goes. That guy is, I mean, nobody's as old as Brent, but Dustin's young and he's got the knowledge. So but yeah, so the Meridio, if you need something entry level, a Fox and Hound kit, you can get them from anywhere from $1,600 to $2,000, and it'll pay for itself the first time you don't look like a moron on a job site troubleshooting HDMI. I actually prefer
Mhm.
the Gen 6 stuff. It's really nice. I have both kits. So, and you can, here's the thing, if you reach out to AV Pro, they'll let you make payments on it. So if you're a smaller company and you're like, man, I really do need that kit, but I can't afford 1,600 right out of the gate, we've all been there. You're not in a position that we don't all understand. Call the guys at Meridio, tell them you need a Fox and Hound. They'll send you one, they'll put it on payments for you, and you can have what you need to be able to do your job professionally.
Yeah, that's a huge point. Joseph, this is one of those things that when you go in to try and solve a problem, right, especially an HDMI problem, you sit there and whether you have a test kit or not, your clients they just think it's supposed to work, right? They were sold the promise of HDMI, a single cable to make everything just work. I'm still answering questions on why CEC doesn't work. How do you go about communicating to consumers?
Are you using ARC or eARC? No, I'm joking. But I'm feeling what you're saying right now. Feeling what you're saying. I always kind of give an example I've used for HDMI's early in infancy. And before I say that, though, I'm going to 100% agree with Steven. And Meridio is the kit you need to get. I mean, that's the one that's recommended by ISF if you get ISF certification. Those tools, like Steven said, they pay for themselves just by you looking like the hero, because you will. So, but going back to that is I always use the, kind of that analogy of with iPhones, right? Especially the cameras on iPhones. HDMI goes through revisions a lot like iPhones, almost as often as iPhones. And, every time they do, they add something new that could be compatible with a source device or a display device or a surround sound device or a soundbar device or whatever the case may be. But it takes the end to end to be able to take advantage of it. You can't take my newer iPhone and plug it up to an old Mac and expect to be able to process or even store any videos you took with the newer iPhone with the older. And let's not even get into the USB cables that are required to do all that when you sync this with that computer. It's the exact same thing. If you want the latest technologies, you've got to have it end to end. And that's the thing with HDMI, in that, a lot of us integrators, as long as we pay attention, we watch and we discover that the HDMI cable itself is the flaw. So we'll either do fiber, going back to what Steven said, or we'll do some kind of category cable if we can support the transmission in it, because we get to take away the mystery of the long HDMI cable and use shorter things and have an easier upgrade path. But that's the thing with HDMI is we're going to blink at this 32 and this 48 gigabits, and it's going to be 100 gigabits at 90, some crazy number that they come up with. It's what HDMI does. But the one interesting thing I'll leave with is the thing this article isn't addressing. 32K. Really? Like, when was the last time we saw one of those things that the scientists did with TVs and said your eyes can only deal with this resolution? Anything above it doesn't matter because your eyes can't tell the difference. Why are we still doing this? Why can't we just go to those doctors and say, okay, if I have 20/20 vision, what is the maximum that my eyes can actually decode? And let's just stop there, and then let's improve transmission rates, audio, things like you're talking about, like CEC and eARC and all those other things. Let's just stop at what the eye can actually comprehend. Let's stop there and fix all the other junk that's in the HDMI.
Those are so boring.
So I actually, sadly, know the answer to that question. The answer to that question.
I do too, but I'll let you.
The answer to the question of why we're doing 8K, 10K, 16K, and up to 30, whatever, 5 bajillion K. is they're focusing on bandwidth as proof of concept to work on augmented reality. So that's where we're going is augmented, and God, there's so many realities now. There's virtual reality, augmented reality, and then there's one more. Um, but that's what they're doing with those resolutions. The problem is that it's weird how they're doing it because when they do augmented reality, they're not going to do it on a 65-inch OLED. They're going to do it on goggles. So you'll literally have small screens that are like that, kind of like in the movie. Was it Ready Player One? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're working towards, but all that definition is going to come in whenever they need that bandwidth in order to do augmented reality, which is terrifying to me. I mean, if you watch the movie Ready Player One, it's literally everybody lives in a video game and they suffer in real life. So that's another conversation, but that's why we're doing those.
Don't we already live in a video game?
I think we are. I wish whoever has my player would jump on a mushroom or something because I'm tired, boss.
All right, gentlemen, let's change topics for a second. I might come back to the USB conversation. But first, this comes to us from Residential Systems, a ResiMercial case study simplifying the automation and AV over IP game at Recovery Grill, a New York chain restaurant. The All-Star Systems integrator went and did a complete upgrade using URC and Just Add Power to design a full system there for the Recovery Sports Grill team. So read through the article. It covers a really good overview of essentially going after this market and how to deliver a quality solution to that market. Joe, gosh, you and I have talked about ResiMercial for stinking years. There still are some people that are just starting to dabble in it, right? How do you go about understanding and recognizing the differences required in system design, in application, and in product selection? Because I will debate this till the end. There is a difference. It is not just an expansion of, a big system you'd use in a house. Doing any sort of commercial is different, and the application is different. The principles might maintain, but it's different. How do you go about learning that?
It's just like our residential guys, right? Me being one of them. We've always especially when we got into control networking, broke these things down into segments. What are the things that I absolutely have to know to be successful in the segments of what I do? And in commercial, light commercial, hospitality, it's breaking down those segments and then understanding what you're dealing with. What is the difference between a balanced cable and a standard RCA? What is the difference between 8 and 4 ohms and 70 volt and 100? What are my distances? What do those transformers on these commercial speakers do? When I'm doing video, what's the difference between a pro display and a residential display? And then having to start looking at all the magical stuff in the background. What are the certifications? What are the ratings? Understanding the difference between a pro display and a residential one. A pro one is meant to be able to just run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and not have any problems. Try that with a residential one. There's all these other things that you have to look at just based on the environment. That is something that is easy for a residential guy to understand because they'll go, does this display go inside or outside? Does the speaker go inside or outside? My speaker run is 200 feet and it's an outdoor speaker. Of course, it's going to be 70 volt. These things can be transitioned if you can understand the environment. Like me and you, Matt, we're talking about, you don't do stereo in these environments. You do mono. And please do 70 volt because then you can properly daisy chain. And if you know how to do your 70 volt, your calculations, your dissipation of wire loss, what amplifier you're going to have to use. Just Add Power, though, and the thing I like about this case study is, they make a solution that can go both ways without much change, right? They have audio breakouts. And if you're using pro amps, you can just use their audio breakout with the Y cable, and then you can go, unbalanced to balanced adapters. And on the input side, you're fine if you use their amp software, which is also pretty awesome for the commercial space. So, at least Just Add Power has taken a lot of that thinking out. But for those of you guys who are wanting to venture into that hospitality area, just realize one thing, that you're going to have, network guys on there that are doing PCI compliant networks, that your stuff can't sit on that same VLAN. There are, like I said, like Matt's pointing out, there are gotchas. To learn it, though, in my opinion, sometimes could be easier than residential, because a lot of those extras that can mess things up in residential don't exist in the hospitality market. You typically have 4 VLANs maximum. You get to use 2, and that's it. The other 2, you don't even get to touch. Your speakers are typically daisy chained. You'll have anywhere from 4 to 12 zones. It's a scale back. You just have to understand the technology that can be implemented and the right way to do it. And like Matt loves to say, you don't use residential displays for a video wall in a hospitality environment. Please stop. Just please stop.
Well, that and residential amplifiers.
Wait a minute, Joe.
And I'll get off my soapbox.
Hey, Joe, if you take the display and you turn it upside down, the edges fit together perfect. So what's the problem?
It's perfect. Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, you just scale it.
That is true.
Yeah.
But that upside down logo is on the top. Those 2 bump outs. You're just like,
That's
what's
what gaff
going
tape's
on
for,
there?
Joe. Joe, that's what gaff tape's for.
I've never thought of using it for that.
Yeah. Geez.
Great idea.
Oh, man.
Steven, you're making fun of me, and I appreciate it. And Joe's not wrong. I stop using residential displays, for the love of God. On a random side note, we got called to do a service on a local bar that was running 8 zones of audio off of a, I'm not going to name the brand, but it was a residential 8-channel amplifier. And they sent me pictures, and I went, "Are you running stereo on that in your bar?" And he's like, "Yeah, it sounds like crap." I'm like, "Yes, it would."
You think?
So yeah, we'll come out and we'll do a full assessment. No, I just need a replacement amplifier because this one blew. I'm like, "You don't say." I'm shocked. No, we won't do that for you. Sorry. Steven, sorry, these ones drive me absolute mad. How do you know as an integrator where your limit is? Because these guys did a fantastic job. This looks great. But as our previous my little soapbox moment, there are lots of people that are playing in the space that shouldn't be. If I see another house of worship project that is in an auditorium that seats 150 people plus, and they put 2 70-inch monitors up on stage, I will have a fit. I'm really, really tired of it.
So here's how you know. You know what you're doing when 2 things are happening. When the checks are coming in.
You know everyone thinks they know what they're doing, right?
Yeah, but here's your 2 things that prove it. If the checks are coming in instead of going out, and if you're getting referrals. If you're getting referrals and your checks are coming in instead of out, that means you probably know what you're doing. It doesn't mean you're perfect, but it means you're not having to pay to fix stuff and refund clients. And it also means that the client is happy enough to tell their friend, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. So that to me, and I use the same thing on residential. Anytime I'm mentoring a business owner, I always say the same thing. You'll know when you start getting it right when the checks are coming in instead of going out. And that is, that's the big catch. Also, if you find yourself on a job site and you look around and you think to yourself, I don't know how to solve this problem, you're probably in over your head, because usually that's a design issue from the beginning. Now, if you walk into somebody else's garbage and you can't figure out how to solve it, that's fine. It's not your product. You'll figure it out. But even in those cases, after you've been doing it for a while, you can usually figure it out. So if you're on a project and you can't figure it out, kind of like I am today with this network, um, I say that knowing I'm sitting here having the same problem, but this is not in my control. Anyway, the if you walk into somebody else's garbage and you're having trouble, don't beat yourself up about it. That's their garbage. You're trying to make chicken salad out of chicken crap. That's hard to do. But if you designed it, you sold it, you installed it, and you get to a point where you don't know why it's not working, you shouldn't be on that job. Period.
How do you go about learning beyond that?
Trial and error.
Because, all right.
Yeah, it's trial and error, man. It's really that simple. It's the same way we all learned. It's the same way you learned. You put in a little system, and then you follow.
I was a
it.
genius from day one. What are you talking about?
You ain't even a genius now.
You know, but Matt brings up a good point, right? So Steven is right in that about the checks going in, the checks going out. Because if you're going to play in bar, restaurant, hospitality, whatever the case is, 80% of them have more than one location. Did you get called to go do that second location? No, that you suck, right? Once you hand over the keys and show them how it's supposed to be, they should already be trying to hand you a check for that second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth location, or the one in another state. They're like, I'm not going to find another guy in this other state. I just want to use you guys. So there's that. Where to learn, you've got a good point, Matt, because in both aspects of the industry, whether it be the residential or, the commercial industry, there really isn't an educational spot for small to mid-range hospitality. No. It doesn't exist. You can either go big and take all those classes, or you can go residential and take there's nothing in the middle to teach you how to do a 24 display, 6-zone bar and restaurant, small hotel lobby, conference rooms. There's nothing that is in the middle. So Steven's right. All mine, 100% will tell you is trial and error, and being able to apply what I know from big commercial side or from residential side and find a happy medium.
Yep.
He's absolutely right. There is no there's no educational pathway.
When you're writing checks instead of cashing checks, that's how you learn. And you've got to be able to do that. You've got to be man enough, of course, person enough, whatever, but you've got to be man enough to be able to say, hey, customer, I'm sorry, here's you a check. I made a mistake. And you got to be man enough to make it right. That's what I always say is, when you hesitate to admit that you made a mistake, the cover up is often worse than the crime. So you pulled the speaker wire wrong. There are technologies to overcome wiring your speakers wrong. There's no technology to overcome a loss of integrity. So
absolutely,
that's the
one of the things. One of the things to pay attention to is, like, you see this great article, this case study by that's out there on a great integrator that did a great job in hospitality. So, like all of the integrators out there watching, they need to pay attention to this space because the manufacturers are starting to pay attention, right? So where I'm at now, we learned a lot from Ambisonic, who figured out how to make really good sounding stuff on 70 volt, right? Changing the game, taking away that 8 ohm is built to sound better. Well, only a certain amount of speakers and wattage and all that, but 70 volts bound to go more distance and more daisy chain, but we're going to sacrifice on sound. But you look at what's happening right now at Origin, pendant speakers are out. The in-ceiling commercial speakers are out. The surface mounts will be out here in a month or so. Because manufacturers are paying attention to that market, the typical commercial brands out there, their products are focused on those big, huge jobs, right? They're not in lifestyle commercial, which is residential, lifestyle commercial, where I'm enjoying myself. They're dentist office speakers or amplifiers, whatever the case may be. So that's the time for our residential integrators to pay attention and say, there is a whole new subsection of revenue for you. And it's not entirely hard to learn. You just have to make sure you're doing it right. And there's guys that you can reach out to that'll kind of help you along the way. I mean, our community is our community. and everybody's there to help.
That's one thing that I do. So if anybody's listening to this and they have questions and they don't want to be talked to like you're a moron or talked down to, or even somebody try to take over your jobs, reach out to me. I mentor companies all over the world, and they call me, we discuss it, we go over the ins and the outs, and I really enjoy helping people not make those mistakes, because if your job looks better the next time I walk on a job, I don't have to hear AV guys suck. And so a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, that's true. All right, let's leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen. Joseph, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Origin Acoustics, where can they do that, bud?
And if you ever want any of that advice like Steven was talking about, and you want to learn how to not do upside down TVs or pendant speakers that look like church bells, you can always get a hold of me at joe@originacoustics.com, or find me on any of the socials. I've been a little quiet on there because there's way too many cool new products coming out, and I'm trying not to spoil anything. But just get a hold of me at joe@originacoustics.com. Any advice, help you need, you can always just reach out.
Excellent. Stephen, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Pro Audio Georgia, where can they do that?
You can reach out to me at proaudioga.com, proaudio_GA on most of your social media platforms. Just reach out. I'm easy to find. Number's been the same for 17 years. So give me a call.
Excellent. Thank you both again for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at Matt D. Scott and most other social platforms. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.